Usually, when you look up at a thunderstorm today, you see atmospheric science. You see warm air rising, cold fronts colliding, all that static discharge. It's a completely observable system.
Right, it's just a meteorological event. It's driven by high and low pressure. It's measurable. And crucially, it's comfortably detached from us down here on the ground.
Exactly. But if you step back, say, 1,000 years, and look up at that exact same sky, that jagged flash of lightning wasn't just a weather pattern. I mean, it was a physical entity actively tearing through the clouds, wielding this localized weapon to protect you from the things lurking in the dark.
Yeah, it was viewed as a very deliberate, very violent act of preservation. We have this modern habit of treating ancient mythologies just creative storytelling around a campfire.
Right, like fairy tales.
Exactly. But for the ancient Norse, it was their lived, waking reality. The sky wasn't some empty expanse.
Yeah.
It was an active battlefield, and they were the ones being defended.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a massive stack of sources for you today. We've got historical encyclopedias, archaeological records, biological taxonomies, even translations of ancient texts. And we're aiming all of them directly at the Norse god of thunder, Thor.
It's a lot of material to get through, but it's fascinating.
It really is. And look, as someone interested in this topic, you probably already know that the clean-shaven, golden-haired superhero from the movie screens is entirely fictional. But our mission today isn't just to, point out that Hollywood got it wrong.
No, the real story is so much bigger than that.
Right. We're going to look at how deeply that fiction has accidentally polluted actual historical records, and, much more importantly, how the raw materials of Thor's myth actively shaped real-world science, geology, biology, and even human psychology for centuries.
Yeah, to really set the baseline here, Thor, or Sor in Old Norse, is an incredibly complex deity. I mean, he's the son of Odin and the earth personification Yor.
Which already ties him to the physical world.
Exactly. He's primarily known as the god of thunder, obviously, but his portfolio is way broader than that. He governs storms, agricultural fertility, the sanctification of everyday life, and ultimately the protection of humanity from the chaotic forces of the cosmos.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can understand how his mythological toolkit, provided the vocabulary for modern scientists, we need to look at what the original sources say about his actual physical capabilities. Like, what did the architects of this myth believe he was physically doing up there?
Well, if we look at the Eddas, those are the 13th century Icelandic manuscripts that preserve the older oral traditions, the physical description is intense. The historical Thor was this fiercely muscled man with a massive red beard.
Right, not blonde, red.
Totally red. And the text constantly emphasized his eyes. He had these piercing, terrifying red eyes. When he was pushed to anger, the sources claim his eyes seemed to literally burn with a physical fire.
Oh, wow. And then there is his gear, which is just as wild. We've got Mjölnir, obviously, the hammer forged by the dwarven brothers Sindri and Brokkr. But what really stands out in the sources is that he didn't just, casually carry this weapon around on his belt.
No, not at all. He required a highly specific loadout just to wield the thing.
Right. He wore this magical belt of strength called Mjölnir that literally doubled his already immense power. And this is the crazy part, he had to wear special iron gloves, Jarngraber, just to physically grip the hammer's shaft.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just needing a firm grip. The implication in the mythology is that Mjolnir was fundamentally volatile.
Like it was unstable.
Exactly. The weapon was so devastatingly powerful, harboring so much localized energy, that it was actually a constant danger to the user.
It's essentially a mythological hazmat suit. I mean, he isn't putting on a belt and gloves to look intimidating. He's putting on industrial containment gear because his weapon will literally destroy him if he handles it unprotected.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
It totally reframes how you look at the character. He's basically carrying a nuclear football.
He really is. That structural instability is a core part of the myth. And actually, speaking of the Mjolnir's composition, there is this really fascinating error we found in our stack of sources.
Oh yeah, the metal thing.
Right. One of the modern historical summaries we reviewed confidently states that Mjolnir was forged from a divine metal called Uru.
Which is incredibly revealing, right? Because Uru is a complete fabrication from 1960s comic books. It has literally zero basis in actual Norse mythology.
None whatsoever. In the original Eddas, Mjolnir is just heavy, mundane iron forged in a furnace by dwarves. But the fact that Uru has bled backward into how modern, otherwise factual historical websites document these ancient myths,
It's crazy.
it really shows you just how pervasive the pop culture pollution is. Modern fiction is actively overwriting the ancient historical record if you aren't paying close attention.
That is wild to see happen in real time. But looking past the metal itself, the abilities attributed to him are just sweeping. I mean, he possesses superhuman physical strength. He initiates flight by hurling the hammer and literally dragging himself through the air.
Yeah, it's a very physical, brutal kind of flight.
Right. And he has absolute dominion over weather patterns and the fertility of the earth. He even travels in a chariot pulled by two goats, Tengrisnir and Tangjoster.
And those goats serve a very specific metaphorical purpose, too. The myth states that Thor can butcher and eat these goats for sustenance, bless their remaining bones with Mjölnir, and they will resurrect the next morning fully formed.
As long as you don't snap the bones, right?
Exactly. Provided no bones were snapped, they're ready to pull his chariot again.
It's just a perfect encapsulation of his role as an agricultural god. You know, it's the cycle of consumption, the death of the harvest, and then that miraculous rebirth of the crops in the spring, all facilitated by the thunder god's blessing. So we have this blueprint of immense world-shaking power. How did the belief in that power practically manifest in the daily lives of the people who worshipped him?
Well, it manifested as absolute utilitarian devotion. Because Thor controlled the rain, he directly controlled the survival of the harvest.
So it wasn't just about war.
Not at all. Mjolnir wasn't primarily viewed as a weapon of war by the average farmer. It was a tool of life. Representations of the hammer were placed in the laps of brides to bless weddings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they used it to consecrate the boundaries of new properties, even to bless newborn children. The hammer was this physical bridge connecting the protective sky to the vulnerable earth.
Which brings us to how these physical symbols actually became tools of resistance. Because if I put myself in the shoes of, like, an 11th century Norse farmer, Christianity is aggressively sweeping across Scandinavia at this point.
Right, kings are converting, the old religious structures are being systematically dismantled.
So what does this all mean for the average Viking trying to hold on to their roots? Because the archaeological record shows that the locals didn't just passively nod and accept this.
No, they absolutely refused. As Christian missionaries and new converts began visibly wearing crosses around their necks, the followers of the old ways responded by rapidly forging and wearing silver Mjölnir pendants.
Just a direct counter movement.
Exactly. Archaeologists have uncovered over 1,000 of these hammer pendants across the Nordic countries, England, and Russia, specifically dating to this period of intense religious transition.
Wearing that pendant, I mean, it doesn't even feel like quiet religious piety at that point. It feels like a political middle finger to the new regime. It's a direct countercultural protest symbol forged in silver.
It really was. You wear the cross, I wear the hammer.
Right. It's a physical display of defiance, basically stating, I do not submit to your new authority. I am under the protection of the Thunderer.
And that psychological need to actively claim his protection extended far beyond personal jewelry. They stamped his identity directly onto the landscape itself.
Like with the symbols and names.
Yeah, the swastika, or sun wheel, was utilized extensively in the Germanic Iron Age as a protective icon representing Thor's lightning centuries before its tragic co-opting in the 20th century, of course. Furthermore, his name was deliberately embedded into geography.
Right, I saw this in the sources. Thorsager in Denmark, which translates to Thor's acre.
Exactly. There's Thursley in England. There is even the Torio River down in Spain.
So you have entire communities anchoring their physical reality to his name. But here's where it gets really interesting. What is truly staggering is that this psychological reliance on Thor didn't just fade away when the Enlightenment hit.
Right, you'd think it would.
Yeah, you would assume that as humanity moved out of the Viking Age and into the era of modern science, the thunder god would just be permanently relegated to folklore. But the exact opposite happens. His mythological toolkit becomes the literal vocabulary for modern science.
It's so true. It reveals a lot about the psychology of scientific discovery, honestly. When human beings uncover something in the natural world that seems impossibly powerful, deeply volatile, or structurally unbreakable, we instinctively reach back to ancient archetypes for a name that captures that magnitude.
Now let's look at chemistry, for instance. In 1828, the Swedish chemist Jöns Jacob Berzelius discovers a new element. It is highly radioactive, incredibly dense, and possesses immense latent energy.
So he needs a name that communicates raw, dangerous power.
Exactly. He calls it thorium.
Berzelius really understood the assignment there. Thorium contains a tremendous amount of usable energy, much like the mythological god himself, and the military followed the exact same psychological impulse decades later.
Oh, the missile program.
Right, in the 1950s, when the United States developed the PGM-17 intermediate-range ballistic missile, they needed a moniker that conveyed destructive, lightning-fast, unstoppable power raining down from the sky. They christened it the Thor missile. They leaned entirely into his association as the ultimate devastating shield.
And it isn't just contained to chemistry and weapons of mass destruction. Here is where the science gets incredibly specific. Let's talk about evolutionary biology and Scutosaurus Thori.
Thor's hero shrew.
Yes, this is a tiny, furry mammal native to the Democratic Republic of Congo. It basically looks like a small mouse with an elongated nose. Why on earth are modern evolutionary biologists naming a tiny African shrew after the Norse god of thunder?
It all comes down to the mechanics of its spine. The hero shrew is the only known mammal in the world with interlocking vertebrae.
Which is wild.
It really is. Its spinal column is incredibly robust, featuring this complex architecture of interlocking bone processes that look almost like a reinforced steel bridge.
It's like biological corrugated iron. It distributes force so effectively that the animal can survive immense amounts of physical pressure that would just instantly crush any other mammal of its size.
Precisely. The scientists who analyzed this creature were so astounded by its impossible physical strength, its virtually unbreakable spine, that they specifically invoked Thor to name it.
That's amazing.
It's a creature that outright defies the normal structural limits of mammalian anatomy, just as Thor defied the physical limitations of the Norse cosmos.
Just a tiny, unbreakable shrew holding up the legacy of the thunder god. And entomology gets in on the action too, but in a much more contentious way. Let's look at the Scarabaeus stricorarius, a species of dung beetle.
Yeah, in historical Sweden, this specific beetle was widely known as the Thor bag.
The Thor bug.
Yes, the Thor bug. And local folklore dictated that if you found one of these beetles stranded on its back, helplessly struggling, and you flipped it right side up, you would earn Thor's favor.
I love that. Just a tiny, everyday act of restoring order to a chaotic situation.
Exactly, which is fundamentally Thor's entire cosmic job description, just scaled down.
But what is truly revealing is how the opposing culture reacted. When the church gained institutional power, they systematically demonized the insect.
Of course they did.
Yeah, they actively renamed it the Thor Devil, or the Thor Devil. They took a mundane bug associated with agricultural good fortune and just weaponized it into a demonic symbol purely to stamp out the remnants of the old religion. It really highlights how intensely cultural warfare can be waged over something as small as a dung beetle.
It was a systematic erasure. But people still tried to rationalize the physical evidence of his power in the earth. In geology and meteorology, 19th century rural communities would frequently unearth smooth, wedge-shaped stones from the soil.
Right, in Sweden they called them Thorwigger, or Thor's wedges.
Exactly.
Because if you are a 19th century farmer and you lack an understanding of geological formations, finding a perfectly symmetrical stone wedge in the dirt requires an explanation.
So they theorized that when Thor hurled a lightning bolt at a troll, the lightning would strike the earth, rapidly cool, and solidify into these physical stone wedges.
It's such a logical attempt to explain the aftermath of a storm based on their worldview.
It really is. Similarly, when massive, heavy meteorites were discovered, folk tradition immediately identified them as physical memorials to his power.
Well, sure, their sheer, inexplicable weight and the fact that they clearly fell from the heavens made them unmistakable physical proof. Like, the thunder god was up there, actively dropping ordnance to defend them.
Yep, it was undeniable proof to them.
So we've established his immense physical strength. We've looked at his unbreakable spine in zoology, his radioactive elements, and how his raw muscle shaped both taxonomy and landscapes. But, there's a risk here of stereotyping him based purely on brawn. When we focus only on the hammer, it paints him as a blunt instrument.
It really does. It reduces him to a cosmic meathead.
Yeah.
A guy who just throws a hammer at his problems until they stop moving.
Exactly. I think he gets stereotyped as a mythological wrecking ball. Like, you point him at a giant, he smashes it, and that's the entirety of his character. But when you critically read the original Eddas, the sources reveal a surprisingly cunning, strategic mind. I mean, if you've ever had to talk your way out of a volatile situation or negotiate under pressure, you are actually using the same playbook Thor utilized. To survive the cosmic threats of Norse cosmology, he had to weaponize his brain.
He frequently relied on intellect over force. Let's examine the poem Alvismol as a primary case study here. In this narrative, a dwarf named Alvis arrives at Asgard, the realm of the gods, while Thor is away, and the other gods apparently make a deal to let this dwarf marry Thor's daughter, Thrud.
Which is an objectively terrible diplomatic decision. You do not barter away Thor's daughter without consulting him.
It was a massive overstep, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Thor returns, finds this dwarf claiming his daughter, and is entirely repulsed by the arrangement. Now, the Wrecking Ball version of Thor would just instantly crush the dwarf with Mjölnir.
Right, just game over.
But Thor is constrained by the strict cultural rules of hospitality and the bureaucratic agreements already established by the other gods. He cannot simply murder his future son-in-law unprovoked without violating sacred laws.
So he has to outmaneuver him legally. He basically weaponizes bureaucracy.
He really does. He challenges Alvis to a battle of intellect. He states, "You can marry my daughter, but only if you can demonstrate supreme wisdom. Answer my questions about the cosmology of the universe."
Okay, so a trivia contest.
Essentially, yes. Thor then begins firing off this relentless series of highly specific, complex questions about the terminology used for natural features across the different languages of elves, men, gods, and giants.
And the dwarf, being incredibly arrogant, eagerly answers every single prompt. He's just showing off his vast intellect.
But he completely fails to realize he is being systematically stalled. Thor deliberately drags this Q&A session out, asking question after question, keeping the dwarf engaged in conversation all through the night.
That's brilliant.
And then the sun crests the horizon. In Norse mythology, dwarves instantly turn to stone when exposed to direct sunlight.
Thor literally says to him, "Day dawns on you now, dwarf. Now sun shines on the hall." I love it. He filibustered the dwarf to death.
That's exactly what he did.
He used a trivia contest as a lethal, premeditated weapon to exploit a biological weakness, all while keeping his own hands perfectly clean. It is a brilliant, bloodless victory.
It demonstrates profound practical patience. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture of his character, it proves that his true power was his capacity to outthink what he was legally or physically constrained from outpunching.
Which leads perfectly into our second case study, the Thrym heist, detailed in the poem Hrimskviya. This is just a masterclass in hostage negotiation.
It's one of the best stories in the Eddas.
So Thor wakes up one morning to find that his hammer, Mjölnir, has been stolen. The thief is a giant king named Thrym, operating out of Jotunheim, the hostile realm of the giants. Thrym essentially holds the entire cosmos hostage.
He has all the leverage.
Right. He declares, "I have buried the hammer 8 leagues underground. I will only return it if the gods surrender the goddess Freya to be my wife."
The stakes are apocalyptic here. Without Mjölnir, Asgard is completely defenseless against the giants.
And Freya, understandably, absolutely refuses to be traded to a giant. The sources say she becomes so enraged that her legendary necklace actually shatters off her chest.
She is not having it.
So the gods convene an emergency council, and the god Heimdall suggests an unthinkable tactical pivot. He proposes that they dress Thor up in a bridal gown, cover his face with a dense bridal veil, pin some feminine brooches on him, and send him into the heart of Jotunheim disguised as the bride.
Thor's initial reaction is intense refusal. He considers it profoundly degrading and unmanly.
Well, sure.
But Loki, operating as the strategic advisor, coldly points out that it is the only logical covert entry method. So Thor swallows his immense pride. This hyper-masculine, fiercely aggressive god of war allows himself to be dressed in bridal drag.
And he rides into enemy territory with Loki acting as his dutiful bridesmaid, which is just an incredible mental image.
It really is.
And the execution of the heist requires incredible restraint. They arrive at the Giants' Hall for the wedding feast. Thor is sitting there disguised as the blushing bride, but he is so ravenously hungry that he consumes an entire ox, 8 whole salmon, and downs 3 entire casks of mead.
Which naturally triggers massive suspicion from the Giant King.
Mm-hmm.
notes that he has never seen a bride take such aggressive, massive bites.
But Loki acts as the ultimate buffer. Loki jumps in and says, "Oh, she was just so profoundly excited to marry you that she hasn't eaten a single bite in 8 days.
And the giant completely buys the flattering lie.
Right. Thrym even attempts to lift the veil for a kiss, catches a glimpse of Thor's terrifying, burning red eyes, and Loki has to immediately spin it again.
Yeah, Loki claims she hasn't slept in 8 days either. She's practically vibrating with excitement.
It is a phenomenal sequence of high-stakes deception. They maintain the ruse just long enough to manipulate the giant's ego.
Right. Thrym, completely fooled and eager to finalize the marriage, calls for Mjölnir to be brought out to formally sanctify the bride's lap. He physically places the weapon right onto the disguised god.
And the microsecond that handle makes contact with his iron gloves, the veil is ripped away. He obliterates Grim, he slaughters the entire wedding party, and he secures the defensive perimeter of Asgard.
It is deeply ruthless.
It is, but it required him to play a humiliating, passive role with absolute perfect timing to secure the extraction.
If we look at what this actually signifies, it shows that his mental resilience, his willingness to suffer deep personal indignity, and his capacity for sustained deception made him the ultimate protector.
He wasn't just a brute force instrument.
Not at all. He was a deeply devoted guardian who would utilize whatever tactical avenue was necessary, whether executing a bureaucratic filibuster or wearing a bridal gown behind enemy lines, to ensure the survival of his people.
Which perfectly encapsulates the journey we've taken today. We've stripped away the Hollywood gloss to see that the real Thor is so much more than a one-dimensional comic book character.
He was the literal psychological shield of the ancient Norse people.
He was a defiant emblem, forged in silver and worn around the neck to resist cultural erasure. He was a mythological force so universally understood that his attributes provided the literal vocabulary for modern chemistry with thorium, for zoology with an unbreakable African shrew, and for geology.
Even our calendars.
Exactly. The rhythm of our modern work week is anchored by him. Thursday stems directly from Hunra's Day, or Thor Norse Day. He is deeply woven into the very bedrock of our lives.
He is a foundational pillar. But, analyzing him as the ultimate protector raises a vital question, and it brings us to his ultimate mythological fate.
Ragnarok.
Yes. In Norse cosmology, permanence does not exist.
Yeah.
Everything eventually must end. At Ragnarok, the apocalyptic dissolution of the world, Thor is prophesied to face his absolute nemesis, the great world serpent, Jormungandr.
The beast so massive it encircles the entire earth, grasping its own tail.
Correct. And the ancient sources are explicitly clear about the mechanics of this final confrontation. Thor engages the serpent in a brutal battle. He successfully strikes the killing blow. He slays the monster that threatens all of existence, fulfilling his role as the ultimate defender.
But he doesn't survive it.
No, the serpent's venom is too volatile, too widespread. Thor is only able to take 9 agonizing steps away from the beast's corpse before he collapses and dies, succumbing to the toxic poison.
He saves the world, but the environment itself becomes too toxic for him to survive.
Precisely, and I want you, the listener, to carefully consider the implications of that narrative choice. In our modern scientific world, we utilize Thor's name to signify indestructible elements, unstoppable ballistic missiles, and unbeatable architectural structures in biology.
We use him as our shorthand for pure invincibility.
We do. But what does it reveal about the ancient Norse worldview and their profound understanding of the natural world that even their most invincible protector, the ultimate symbol of life, strength, and agricultural fertility, was always prophesied to succumb to the toxic, overwhelming forces of nature?
Wow.
It is a stark admission that even the gods who command the sky are ultimately subject to the immutable laws of the natural world.
That is a staggering and honestly deeply sobering thought to end on. Just a reminder that in the final calculation, nature reclaims everything, even the thunder.
It reclaims us all.
So the next time you are studying a periodic table or reading a biological taxonomy or simply checking your calendar on a Thursday, and especially the next time you step outside and witness a jagged flash of lightning tear across a storm-darkened sky, remember the red-bearded tactician?
He earned his place in history.
He really did. Remember the ancient thunder god who didn't just remain an abstract concept in the clouds, but buried himself deep into the scientific and cultural bedrock of our reality.
Thank you for diving deep with us.
We'll see you next time.